The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street as 12-year-old Marcus Williams walked toward the corner store. His worn sneakers made soft sounds against the cracked pavement, and his mother's shopping list crinkled in his pocket. The summer heat was already building, though it was barely 8 in the morning. Marcus lived in one of the older neighborhoods where houses sat close together, their paint faded and gardens overgrown with weeds that nobody had time to pull. His family wasn't wealthy by any means. His mother, Sarah, worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. She cleaned office buildings at night and worked at a local diner during the day, always coming home exhausted with aching feet and tired eyes. Marcus understood their situation better than most kids his age. He never asked for expensive toys or brand-name clothes like his classmates. Instead, he helped however he could, running errands and looking after his younger sister Emma while their mother worked. The Williams family had moved to this neighborhood 3 years ago when Marcus was 9. It wasn't the nicest area, but the rent was affordable, and the neighbors were decent people who looked out for each other. Mrs. Rodriguez, next door, often brought over extra soup when she cooked too much. Mr. Thompson across the street would help fix things around their apartment when the landlord took too long to respond. This sense of community had taught Marcus important values about helping others, even when you didn't have much to give. As Marcus walked that morning, he thought about the math test he had the next week and how he needed to study harder if he wanted to keep his good grades. Education was important to his mother, who had dropped out of high school when she became pregnant with him. She constantly reminded him that school was his ticket to a better life, something she never had the chance to pursue. Marcus took these words seriously and spent hours each night doing homework at their small kitchen table under the flickering fluorescent light. The corner store was owned by Mr. Patel, an elderly man who had immigrated from India decades ago. He knew most of the neighborhood kids by name and often gave them small discounts when their families were struggling. Marcus enjoyed talking to Mr. Patel, who told fascinating stories about his homeland and always had wise advice about working hard and being kind to others. The store was small and cramped, with narrow aisles packed from floor to ceiling with everything from milk and bread to school supplies and candy. Marcus was checking his mother's list when he heard the sound of a car engine making strange noises outside. Through the store window, he could see a sleek black sedan pulled over on the side of the road. Steam was rising from under the hood and the driver appeared to be having trouble. The man got out of the car dressed in an expensive-looking suit despite the early hour. He was probably in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of confident posture that suggested he was used to being in charge of situations. However, this morning, the man looked completely lost. He opened the hood of his car and stared at the engine with obvious confusion. Marcus could see him pulling out his phone, probably trying to call for help. The man paced back and forth beside his car, clearly frustrated and running late for something important. He kept checking his expensive watch and looking up and down the street as if hoping someone would magically appear to solve his problem. Marcus finished gathering the items from his mother's list and paid Mr. Patel as he walked outside. With the small bag of groceries, he couldn't help but notice the man's predicament. The sedan was clearly overheated with coolant pooling beneath it on the asphalt. Marcus had learned a bit about cars from watching Mr. Thompson work on his old pickup truck. He knew that overheating was often caused by low coolant or a problem with the radiator, and that the engine needed to cool down before anyone could safely check what was wrong. The man noticed Marcus watching and gave him a brief, polite nod before returning to his phone call. Marcus could hear fragments of the conversation as he walked by. The man was explaining to someone that he was going to be late for an important meeting, that his car had broken down, and that he needed alternative transportation immediately. His voice carried the tone of someone accustomed to having problems solved quickly by others. Marcus paused on the sidewalk, torn between continuing home to help his mother and offering assistance to this stranger. His mother had always taught him to be helpful when he could, especially to people in need. She often said that kindness cost nothing but could mean everything to someone having a difficult day. At the same time, Marcus wasn't sure what he could actually do to help. The man was clearly wealthy and probably had resources that Marcus couldn't even imagine. Looking at the situation more carefully, Marcus realized that the man's biggest problem wasn't necessarily the mechanical issue itself, but rather his immediate need to get somewhere important. The car would need time to cool down before anyone could properly assess the damage, and even then, it would likely require professional repair. What the man really needed was either alternative transportation or someone who could help him figure out his next steps. Marcus made his decision. He approached the man cautiously, not wanting to intrude but genuinely wanting to help. The stranger looked up from his phone with a mixture of hope and skepticism. After all, what could a 12-year-old boy possibly do about a broken-down luxury car? But there was something in Marcus's earnest expression that made the man pause and listen. This moment of connection between two people from completely different worlds was about to change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible over the sound of the still-ticking engine. "I think I might be able to help you." The man looked down at Marcus with surprise. His name was Robert Chen, and he was the CEO of a major technology company that employed thousands of people. He was used to dealing with board meetings, million-dollar contracts, and complex business negotiations. The idea that a young boy could help him with his current crisis seemed almost absurd. But something about Marcus's sincere expression made him pause his phone conversation. "I'm sorry, son, but this is a pretty serious mechanical problem," Robert said gently, not wanting to hurt the boy's feelings. "I'm going to need to call a professional tow truck." Marcus nodded understandingly but didn't walk away. "I know I can't fix your car, sir, but I've been watching you for a few minutes and it looks like you're really worried about getting somewhere important. My neighbor, Mr. Thompson, knows a lot about cars and he lives just 2 houses down from here. He might be able to at least tell you what's wrong so you know what to expect." Robert checked his watch again. He was supposed to be at the most important investor meeting of his career in less than 2 hours. The meeting was across town, and without his car he was facing a serious problem. Taxi services in this neighborhood were unreliable, and rideshare apps showed long wait times due to high demand during morning rush hour. The idea of asking a neighbor for help was foreign to him, but his usual resources weren't working. "Also," Marcus continued, "there's a bus stop 3 blocks from here that goes downtown. The buses run every 15 minutes during rush hour. It's not as comfortable as your car, but it might get you where you need to go faster than waiting for a tow truck." This suggestion caught Robert's attention. In his world of private cars and company drivers, he hadn't considered public transportation in years. But Marcus was right about the time factor. Even if he could get his car towed immediately, he would still need alternative transportation to make his meeting. "You really think your neighbor would help a stranger?" Robert asked, genuinely curious about this concept that seemed so natural to Marcus. "Mr. Thompson helps everybody," Marcus replied with certainty. "He fixed Mrs. Johnson's washing machine last month, and he helped the Martinez family move their furniture when they couldn't afford professional movers. That's just what neighbors do for each other." Robert found himself genuinely intrigued by this perspective. In his upscale neighborhood, people barely knew each other's names, let alone offered help with practical problems. Everyone hired professionals for everything and maintained polite but distant relationships with their neighbors. The idea of a community where people actually looked out for each other was both foreign and appealing. "All right," Robert said, making a decision that surprised even himself. "Could you introduce me to your neighbor?" Marcus's face lit up with a smile that reminded Robert of his own daughter, whom he barely saw due to his demanding work schedule. The boy immediately started walking toward Mr. Thompson's house, carrying his grocery bag and chatting easily as they went. Marcus pointed out various houses and told Robert about the families who lived in them. The Garcias had 3 young children and a dog that loved to chase squirrels. The elderly Mrs. Peterson grew the most beautiful roses and often gave bouquets to neighbors for special occasions. Mr. Thompson was in his driveway, already working under the hood of his pickup truck, despite the early hour. He was a man in his 60s with calloused hands and grease-stained work clothes, but his face was kind and intelligent. When Marcus explained the situation, Mr. Thompson didn't hesitate for a second. He wiped his hands on a rag and followed them back to Robert's car. Within minutes, Mr. Thompson had diagnosed the problem. The radiator hose had burst, causing all the coolant to leak out and the engine to overheat. It wasn't a complicated repair, but it wasn't something that could be fixed on the spot without the proper parts. The car would need to be towed to a shop and the repair would take several hours at minimum. "But here's the thing," Mr. Thompson said, looking directly at Robert. This kind of problem usually gives you warning signs for days or weeks before it completely fails. Your car's been trying to tell you something was wrong, but maybe you've been too busy to notice. Robert realized this was absolutely true. He had noticed the temperature gauge running slightly higher than normal for the past week, but he had been so focused on preparing for his investor meeting that he kept putting off a visit to his mechanic. This breakdown was the result of ignoring small problems until they became big ones. Marcus had been listening quietly to this conversation, and he could see that Robert was worried about more than just the car repair. The man kept checking his phone and his watch, and his stress was obvious. Without being asked, Marcus spoke up again. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, where do you need to be this morning? Maybe there's another way I can help." Robert looked at this earnest young boy who had already done more to help him than anyone in his usual circle would have thought to do. He made another surprising decision and told Marcus about his investor meeting, explaining that the future of his company and the jobs of thousands of employees might depend on his being there on time. Marcus thought for a moment, then his face brightened. "My mom works at Peterson's Diner downtown, and she always takes the number 42 bus to get there. If you take that bus, you'll be right in the business district in about 45 minutes. That should give you plenty of time for your meeting." What happened next amazed Robert even more than the practical help Marcus had already provided. The boy offered to walk with him to the bus stop to make sure he didn't get lost, and even suggested lending him his student bus pass so Robert wouldn't have to worry about having exact change. This level of thoughtfulness and generosity from someone who clearly had very little was unlike anything Robert had experienced in his professional world. As they walked to the bus stop together, Robert found himself in the most unusual conversation of his life. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about what Robert did for work, and when Robert explained that he ran a technology company, Marcus's eyes widened with genuine interest. The boy asked about computer programming, software development, and how technology could help solve problems in communities like his own. Robert was struck by Marcus's intelligence and curiosity. The boy wasn't just making polite conversation. He was asking the kind of insightful questions that Robert usually only heard from his most experienced employees. Marcus wanted to know how technology companies decided which problems to solve, and whether they ever focused on helping people in neighborhoods like this one, where resources were limited but community spirit was strong. Most of the time, Robert admitted honestly, "We focus on creating products for people who can afford to pay premium prices for them. We don't really think much about communities where people might need technology but can't afford our usual offerings." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense from a business perspective, but it seems like you might be missing opportunities to help a lot of people. There are really smart people in every neighborhood, but they don't all have the same chances to learn about technology or get involved with companies like yours." This observation hit Robert harder than he expected. In all his years of running board meetings and analyzing market strategies, he had never thought about his business from this perspective. Marcus was pointing out a blind spot that Robert hadn't even realized existed. The technology industry often talked about innovation and disruption, but they rarely considered how to make their innovations accessible to communities that needed them most. When they reached the bus stop, Robert realized he had no idea how public transportation actually worked. He hadn't ridden a bus since college, and even then it had been rarely. Marcus patiently explained the route system, showed him how to read the schedule posted at the stop, and even pointed out landmarks along the way so Robert would know when to get off at the right location. "The business district stop is right in front of the big marble building with the golden lion statues," Marcus explained. "You can't miss it. And if you get confused, just ask the bus driver. They're usually really helpful." As they waited for the bus to arrive, Marcus continued to amaze Robert with his maturity and wisdom. The boy talked about his goals for the future, his determination to get good grades so he could earn a college scholarship, and his dreams of someday starting a business that could help his community prosper. Marcus had clearly thought deeply about the connection between education, opportunity, and social responsibility. "My mom always says that education is the great equalizer," Marcus explained. "She didn't get to finish high school because she had me when she was young, but she makes sure I understand that learning is the key to building a better life. Not just for me, but for everyone around me." Robert found himself thinking about his own daughter, who attended an expensive private school and had every advantage money could buy, yet seemed to lack the drive and purpose that Marcus demonstrated naturally. She had access to the best teachers, the latest technology, and unlimited opportunities, but she didn't seem to appreciate any of it. Meanwhile, Marcus was working with limited resources but unlimited determination to make something meaningful of his life. When the bus arrived, Robert was surprised by Marcus's final gesture of kindness. The boy not only gave him the student pass as promised, but also wrote down his phone number on a piece of paper, just in case Robert needed any help navigating the city or getting back to his car later in the day. "I'll be in school most of the day," Marcus explained. "But if you need anything, you can call me after 3 o'clock. I know this part of the city pretty well, and I'd be happy to help however I can." As Robert climbed onto the bus, he turned back to thank Marcus properly, but the boy was already walking away, hurrying to get home with the groceries before his mother left for her morning shift at the diner. Robert took a seat by the window and watched Marcus's figure disappear around the corner, carrying himself with a confidence and purpose that was remarkable for someone so young. During the bus ride downtown, Robert found himself reflecting on everything that had happened that morning. In less than an hour, a 12-year-old boy had solved problems that Robert's usual resources couldn't handle, had introduced him to a sense of community he didn't know existed, and had challenged his thinking about business and social responsibility in ways that years of expensive consulting hadn't. Achieved the investor meeting that had seemed so crucial that morning suddenly felt less overwhelming. Robert realized that his car breaking down might have been exactly what he needed to gain a new perspective on his company's mission and values. Marcus had shown him that real problem-solving often came from understanding people's actual needs and circumstances, not just from having access to the most expensive solutions. As the bus pulled into the business district, Robert made a decision that would surprise everyone who knew him. Instead of focusing exclusively on the financial projections and market analysis he had prepared for the investors, he was going to talk about community impact and social responsibility. He was going to propose that his company explore ways to make their technology accessible to neighborhoods like Marcus's, where innovation could make a real difference in people's daily lives. The meeting location was exactly where Marcus had said it would be, right in front of the marble building with golden lion statues. As Robert walked toward the entrance, he realized that a 12-year-old boy had just taught him more about leadership and business vision than most of his expensive business school courses had covered. But Robert had no idea that this was just the beginning of how Marcus would change his life. The real transformation was still to come, and it would challenge everything Robert thought he knew about success, community, and what it means to make a meaningful difference in the world. Marcus had planted seeds of change that would grow in ways neither of them could have imagined that morning at the bus stop. The investor meeting was unlike any Robert had ever conducted. Instead of diving straight into profit margins and market projections, he began by telling the story of his morning adventure. He described meeting Marcus, learning about the power of community cooperation, and discovering perspectives on technology that had never occurred to him in all his years of business experience. The investors listened with growing interest as Robert proposed a new initiative alongside their existing product lines. He suggested developing affordable technology solutions specifically designed for underserved communities, programs that could provide educational opportunities to talented young people, regardless of their economic circumstances, and partnerships with local organizations to identify and support the next generation of innovators. "What you're proposing sounds admirable," said Margaret Wells, the lead investor, "but how does this align with our profit expectations? Serving low-income communities doesn't typically generate the returns our fund requires." Robert had anticipated this question, and his answer surprised even himself. "I believe we've been thinking about this incorrectly. Communities like the one I visited this morning are full of untapped talent and innovative thinking. By investing in these areas, we're not just being charitable. We're identifying and developing the human resources that could drive our future growth." He went on to explain that companies that ignored entire segments of the population were missing opportunities to discover breakthrough ideas, develop new markets, and build brand loyalty among demographics that other companies overlooked. Marcus had demonstrated problem-solving skills and business insights that many of Robert's well-educated employees lacked. simply because he had learned to think creatively with limited resources. The investors were intrigued enough to approve a pilot program, but Robert knew that the real test would be in the implementation. That afternoon, after retrieving his repaired car, he drove back to Marcus's neighborhood. He wanted to thank the boy properly and learn more about the community that had already taught him so much. When Robert knocked on the door of the small apartment, he was greeted by Sarah Williams, Marcus's mother. She was a woman in her early 30s who looked older, due to the stress and exhaustion of working 2 jobs to support her family. When Robert introduced himself and explained how Marcus had helped him that morning, Sarah's tired face lit up with pride. "That boy has always had a good heart," she said, inviting Robert inside their modest home. "I worry sometimes that he takes on too much responsibility for his age, but he seems to understand that we all have to help each other get through life." The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but it was clean and filled with evidence of a family that valued education and hard work. Marcus's homework was neatly organized on the kitchen table. His little sister Emma's drawings were taped to the refrigerator, and books from the public library were stacked carefully on every available surface. When Marcus returned from school, he was surprised but pleased to see Robert sitting in their living room, talking with his mother. Robert had brought a small gift as a thank you, a tablet computer that he thought Marcus might enjoy. But when he presented it to the boy, Marcus's reaction was unexpected. "This is really generous of you, Mr. Chen," Marcus said respectfully, "but I can't accept something this expensive. You already got your car fixed and made it to your important meeting. That's thanks enough." Sarah looked at her son with obvious pride, but she also seemed concerned about refusing such a valuable gift. Robert realized that Marcus was demonstrating the same thoughtful consideration he had shown that morning when he offered help, without expecting anything in return. "What if we made it an educational loan instead of a gift?" Robert suggested. "You could use it for school projects and learning programming, and someday when you're running your own successful company, you could pass along similar opportunities to other young people." This compromise felt right to Marcus, who accepted the tablet with gratitude and immediately began asking Robert detailed questions about how technology companies operated. Their conversation continued for hours, covering everything from software development to business ethics to the responsibilities that come with success. Robert learned that Marcus had been teaching himself basic programming, using library books and free online resources, but his progress was limited by lack of access to proper equipment and mentorship. The boy had incredible natural ability but needed guidance and opportunities that weren't available in his current environment. Over the following weeks, Robert found himself returning to Marcus's neighborhood regularly. What had started as a simple thank you visit evolved into an informal mentorship that benefited both of them. Robert helped Marcus develop his programming skills and introduced him to concepts about entrepreneurship and leadership. In return, Marcus continued to challenge Robert's assumptions about business and community responsibility. These conversations led to concrete changes in Robert's company. He established a scholarship program for students from underserved communities, created internship opportunities that didn't require expensive college degrees, and began developing products specifically designed to be affordable and accessible to families like Marcus's. But the most significant change was in Robert's personal priorities. He had spent years focused exclusively on building wealth and professional success, often at the expense of relationships with his family and community involvement. Marcus showed him that true success included using his resources and influence to create opportunities for others. Sarah Williams watched this friendship develop with a mixture of gratitude and caution. She appreciated Robert's genuine interest in her son's future, but she was also protective of Marcus and concerned about the potential complications of such different social worlds colliding. "Mr. Chen is a good man," she told Marcus one evening after Robert had left. "But you need to remember that this friendship exists because you were kind to a stranger, not because you expected anything in return. Don't let these opportunities change who you are or make you think you're better than your family and neighbors." Marcus understood his mother's concerns, and he made sure to maintain his responsibilities at home and his connections with his community. He continued to help Mr. Thompson with car repairs, assist Mrs. Rodriguez with her grandchildren, and excel in his regular school classes. The opportunities Robert was providing enhanced his life, but didn't replace the values and relationships that had shaped him. As autumn approached, Robert realized that his friendship with Marcus had become one of the most meaningful relationships in his life. The boy continued to surprise him with insights that improved both his business decisions and his personal perspective on what really mattered in life. By winter, the changes in both Marcus's and Robert's lives had become dramatic. Marcus was thriving academically, having been accepted into an advanced technology program at a magnet school across the city. The scholarship Robert had helped him secure covered not just tuition, but also transportation and supplies. However, Marcus insisted on maintaining his connection to his original neighborhood and continued living at home with his family. Robert's company had successfully launched its community outreach initiative, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The pilot programs in underserved neighborhoods had identified dozens of talented young people with innovative ideas for solving local problems through technology. Some of these solutions were so impressive that Robert's company decided to develop them into commercial products, creating a new revenue stream while addressing real community needs. The success of these programs had attracted national attention. Robert found himself invited to speak at conferences about social entrepreneurship and community-based innovation. However, he always made sure to credit Marcus and the other young people who had inspired these changes. Rather than taking personal credit for the initiative, Marcus had become something of a local celebrity in his neighborhood, but he handled the attention with the same thoughtful maturity he had always shown. He started a computer club for younger kids, teaching them basic programming skills and helping them understand how technology could be used to solve problems in their daily lives. The club met in the community center basement, using donated equipment that Robert's company had provided. "I want other kids to have the same opportunities I've had," Marcus explained to Robert during one of their regular mentoring sessions. "But I also want them to remember that fancy equipment isn't what makes you smart or creative. The most important thing is learning to think about problems differently and never giving up when things get difficult." Sarah Williams had initially been overwhelmed by the rapid changes in her family's circumstances, but she gradually came to appreciate the genuine friendship that had developed between her son and Robert. She could see that Robert respected Marcus's values and wasn't trying to change him into someone he wasn't. Instead, he was helping Marcus become the best version of himself. The relationship had also brought unexpected benefits for Sarah herself. When Robert learned about her incredible work ethic and natural intelligence, he helped her enroll in night classes to complete her high school diploma. The company's scholarship program had expanded to include educational opportunities for parents of participants, recognizing that supporting entire families was more effective than helping individuals in isolation. Robert's own family life had improved dramatically as well. Inspired by his relationship with Marcus, he began spending more quality time with his own daughter, taking genuine interest in her thoughts and dreams rather than just monitoring her grades and achievements. He realized that he had been so focused on providing material advantages that he had forgotten to provide the emotional support and intellectual engagement that young people really needed. His wife noticed the change in him immediately. Robert had become more thoughtful, more present in family conversations, and more interested in using their wealth to make meaningful contributions to their community rather than just accumulating more possessions. They began hosting dinners that brought together people from different backgrounds, creating connections between their affluent friends and families like the Williams, who had wisdom and perspectives to share. As spring arrived, Robert and Marcus began working on their most ambitious project yet. They had identified a problem that affected many families in Marcus's neighborhood: lack of access to reliable internet service, which made it difficult for students to complete online assignments and limited their access to educational resources. Rather than simply donating money to solve the problem, Robert encouraged Marcus to research the issue thoroughly and develop a comprehensive solution. Marcus spent weeks interviewing neighbors, researching internet service providers, and analyzing the economic factors that made high-speed internet unaffordable for many families. The solution Marcus developed was ingenious in its simplicity. He proposed creating a community network that would share high-speed internet access among multiple households, reducing individual costs while providing technical support through trained local volunteers. The plan included training programs for residents who wanted to learn basic computer skills, as well as educational workshops for parents who needed help supporting their children's online learning. When Marcus presented this proposal to Robert's company board, the executives were impressed by the thoroughness of his research and the practicality of his recommendations. They approved funding for the pilot program and offered Marcus a part-time position as a community liaison, making him the youngest consultant in the company's history. However, the most meaningful moment came during the presentation when Margaret Wells, the lead investor who had initially questioned the profitability of community-focused initiatives, made an unexpected announcement. She revealed that the success of these programs had inspired her investment fund to create an entirely new category of social impact investments, and that Marcus's neighborhood project would be their first major commitment in this area. "Young man," she said to Marcus after the presentation, "you've changed how we think about the relationship between profit and purpose. Your work has shown us that the most sustainable businesses are those that create value for entire communities, not just for shareholders." Marcus accepted the praise graciously, but used the opportunity to redirect attention to the other young people in his community who had contributed ideas and support to the project. He insisted that success was always a team effort, and that individual recognition was less important than collective progress. That evening, as Robert drove Marcus home through the familiar streets of the neighborhood where they had first met, both of them reflected on how much their lives had changed. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had evolved into a friendship that was transforming not only their personal lives, but also creating ripple effects throughout their community and beyond. "You know," Robert said as they pulled up to Marcus's building, "I used to think that success was measured by how much money you made and how many people worked for you. But you've taught me that real success is measured by how many people you lift up along the way." Marcus smiled and replied, "My mom always says that we're all just walking each other home. I think that means we're supposed to help each other become the best versions of ourselves, and then teach other people to do the same thing." Neither of them knew it yet, but their story was about to take another unexpected turn that would test everything they had learned about friendship, success, and the true meaning of making a difference in the world. 2 years later, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium at the National Youth Innovation Conference, preparing to deliver the keynote address. At 14, he was the youngest person ever invited to speak at this prestigious event, but his calm confidence showed no trace of nervousness. In the audience sat Robert Chen, Sarah Williams, and hundreds of other people whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of that morning encounter over a broken-down car. The Community Internet Project had become a model that was being replicated in cities across the country. Marcus's approach of combining technological solutions with community engagement had proven so effective that universities were now studying it as an example of grassroots innovation. But more importantly to Marcus, the project had helped dozens of families in his neighborhood gain access to educational and economic opportunities that had previously been out of reach. 3 years ago, Marcus began his speech, "I was just a kid walking to the corner store when I saw a stranger having car trouble. I had no idea that offering to help would change both of our lives forever. But that experience taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned. Small acts of kindness can create big changes, but only if we're brave enough to follow through on the opportunities they create." He went on to describe how his friendship with Robert had opened doors he never could have imagined, but emphasized that the real transformation had happened because both of them were willing to step outside their comfort zones and learn from each other. Marcus credited his mother's values, his neighbors' examples of community cooperation, and Robert's willingness to listen and learn as the foundation for everything that had followed. Robert listened with tears in his eyes as Marcus described their journey together. The boy had become not just a protege but a true friend, whose wisdom and perspective continued to challenge and inspire him. Robert's company had grown significantly in the past 3 years, but more importantly, it had become a model for how businesses could succeed while creating positive social impact. The scholarship program had expanded to serve thousands of students. The community technology initiatives had spread to dozens of cities, and the company's focus on inclusive innovation had attracted top talent from around the world. Employees were proud to work for an organization that measured success not just in financial terms but in terms of lives changed and communities strengthened. Sarah, Williams had completed not only her high school diploma, but also a degree in business administration, attending classes at night while continuing to work and support her family. She had accepted a position managing the parent education component of Robert's community programs, using her own experience to help other families navigate the challenges and opportunities that came with educational advancement. Marcus's sister, Emma, now 10 years old, had inherited her brother's curiosity and sense of social responsibility. She was already showing remarkable aptitude in mathematics and science, but more importantly, she had learned from Marcus's example that intelligence was most valuable when used to help others. The computer club that Marcus had started now served over 100 children, with Emma as one of its most enthusiastic junior mentors. As Marcus concluded his speech, he issued a challenge to the audience that had become his signature message. Every day, each of us has opportunities to help someone else, even in small ways. We never know which of these moments might change everything. The question isn't whether you're smart enough or successful enough to make a difference. The question is whether you're paying enough attention to notice when someone needs help, and whether you're brave enough to offer it. After the conference, Marcus and Robert returned to their old neighborhood for a celebration at the community center. The basement room where the computer club met had been transformed into a modern learning laboratory, complete with high-speed internet and state-of-the-art equipment. But the most important element remained unchanged: the spirit of cooperation and mutual support that had always characterized this community. Mr. Thompson, now in his 70s but still fixing cars and helping neighbors, raised a toast to Marcus and Robert. "You two have shown all of us that it doesn't matter where you start in life or how much money you have," he said. "What matters is whether you're willing to help each other and whether you remember to stay grateful for the people who help you along the way." Mrs. Rodriguez, whose grandchildren were now among the top students in the computer club, added her own perspective. Marcus never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped believing that everyone in this neighborhood had something valuable to contribute. That's why all these wonderful changes feel natural instead of foreign. As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself standing outside the community center with Robert, looking up at the same stars they had admired during many of their conversations over the past 3 years. The neighborhood looked different now, with better lighting, improved infrastructure, and small businesses that had opened as a result of the increased economic activity. But the fundamental character of the place remained the same: a community where people looked out for each other. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your car hadn't broken down that morning? Marcus asked. Robert smiled. "I used to think it was just a coincidence, but now I believe it was exactly what both of us needed, even though we didn't know it at the time. You were ready to help someone, and I was ready to learn something new about what really matters in life. Sometimes the universe just aligns things perfectly." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "My mom says that opportunities to do good are always around us, but we have to train ourselves to see them. She thinks that morning was just the first time I was old enough and confident enough to act on what I saw." Over the following months, Marcus continued to balance his accelerated academic program with his community responsibilities. He had been accepted to multiple prestigious universities with full scholarships, but he had decided to attend a local institution that would allow him to continue his work in the neighborhood while pursuing his education. His long-term goal was to start his own company that would focus exclusively on developing technology solutions for underserved communities. Robert had become not just a mentor, but a true family friend. He regularly attended Emma's school events, celebrated holidays with the Williams family, and continued to seek Marcus's advice on business decisions. The friendship had enriched both of their lives in ways that went far beyond professional success or educational achievement. The ripple effects of their relationship continued to expand in unexpected directions. Other business leaders who had heard their story began implementing similar community engagement programs. Universities started recruiting students from neighborhoods like Marcus's, recognizing that diversity of background led to diversity of thinking and innovation. Young people across the country began looking for ways to help strangers, inspired by the example of how small acts of kindness could lead to extraordinary outcomes. Marcus's story had been featured in national magazines, and he had received invitations to speak at events around the world. However, he remained grounded in his original community and committed to his core values. He turned down opportunities that would have made him wealthy but taken him away from the work he felt called to do. Success isn't about how far you can get from where you started, he explained to a reporter who questioned his decision to stay local. Success is about how much good you can do with whatever opportunities come your way. I've been given incredible chances to learn and grow, and now I have a responsibility to make sure other people get similar opportunities. As Marcus prepared to graduate from high school at age 16, 3 years ahead of his original class, he reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple offer to help a stranger with car trouble. The experience had taught him that kindness was not just about making people feel good. It was about creating connections that could transform lives and communities. The final surprise came during his graduation ceremony, when Robert announced the establishment of the Marcus Williams Foundation for Community Innovation, funded with a significant portion of his personal wealth and designed to support young people who demonstrated both academic ability and commitment to serving others. This foundation exists because one young man showed me that real leadership isn't about having power over other people, Robert explained to the audience. It's about empowering other people to discover their own potential and use it to make the world better. Marcus accepted this honor with characteristic humility, immediately announcing that the foundation's first initiative would be to create similar programs in communities across the country, led by local young people who understood their neighborhood's specific needs and strengths. Years later, when people asked Marcus about the secret to creating positive change, he always returned to the same simple message. Pay attention to the people around you, offer help when you can, and never underestimate the power of treating everyone with respect and kindness. You never know which conversation, which moment of connection, which small act of service might change everything. The story of Marcus Williams and Robert Chen became a testament to the truth that ordinary people doing ordinary acts of kindness can create extraordinary ripple effects that transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. Their friendship proved that success is not about what you achieve for yourself, but about what you enable others to achieve, and that the most powerful changes often begin with the simplest human connections. Marcus never forgot that morning when he chose to help a stranger, and Robert never forgot the lesson that a 12-year-old boy taught him about what it really means to be successful. Together they had discovered that kindness is not just a nice gesture, it is a force that can change the world. One person, one community, one act of service at a time.